All right, everybody, let's get right into it. Today we're going to try something a little different.
Okay.
Just one source, but it's a good one. We're going deep on a recording of a Donald Trump town hall. It took place in Lancaster, Pennsylvania,
Okay.
15 days before the 2024 election.
Wow. So right down to the wire.
Yeah, talk about pressure.
Really?
So this is a great look at how Trump connects with voters in the final days of a campaign. The recording starts with Trump.
Okay.
Fresh off a McDonald's run, talking to this huge overflow crowd that's like dying to hear him speak.
Setting the stage.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then he immediately starts working the crowd, like right away.
Oh, really?
Noticing a woman crying,
Wow.
commenting on someone's physique, even joking about outfits.
Yeah.
I mean, it just feels more personal and intimate than a typical campaign stop, don't you think?
I do. It does. Yeah. That's one of Trump's strengths for sure.
Yeah.
Is that relatable kind of friend-like persona.
Right.
It really resonates with his base, especially when you contrast that with how stuffy and formal most political events are.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of relatable,
Okay.
there's this moment where he talks about this waitress who suggests no taxes on pips.
Mm.
And of course, he claims...
So let me guess. He claims he was the first one to think of it.
He was the first one to bring this up.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that sort of thing resonates with voters? Especially those in service industries?
I think it's smart, yeah. It allows him to connect with a very specific part of the electorate.
Right.
Position himself as a champion for the working class.
Right.
Which fits that outsider image he's always trying to cultivate.
Exactly.
He's one of the people, not like those career politicians.
Okay, so let's get into the Q&A, because this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
First up is Bob.
All right.
He's a retired union worker who asks about protecting Social Security and Medicare benefits.
Yeah.
I bet that's on a lot of our listeners' minds, too.
Absolutely. That's a crucial issue for people nearing retirement or living on a fixed income.
Yeah.
And Trump knows that.
Yeah.
He really plays up the economic anxieties that a lot of people are feeling.
Right.
He goes on about how inflation has decimated fixed incomes and puts the blame directly on the current administration. Okay,
so then he lays out his own economic plan.
Okay.
No taxes on Social Security benefits, tips, or overtime.
Wow.
And a full interest deduction on car purchases.
That's a lot.
I mean, do you think he's directly targeting Bob's concerns here?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. He's tailoring his message to play on their immediate fears, offering solutions that'll ease their financial burdens.
Yeah.
It's textbook campaigning.
And it doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
He also links energy policy to inflation.
Okay.
Promising to cut energy bills by 50% within a year of taking office.
Wow.
If elected.
Yeah.
That's a bold claim.
A bold claim.
For sure.
It's kind of what he does. But I think it's good to ask, as a listener, how much of this is actual achievable policy versus just campaign rhetoric meant to, get people on his side?
Something to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so next up we have a Lancaster County sheriff who asked about supporting local law enforcement. And Trump mentions that.
Let me guess, he's got a lot of endorsements from law enforcement.
49.
Wow.
Out of 67 sheriffs in Pennsylvania have endorsed him.
That is a lot.
So that's a big deal.
Well, it's definitely strategic, right? It boosts his credibility on this law and order platform, especially in a swing state like Pennsylvania, which we all know is super important for anyone who wants to win the presidency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then he goes on to talk about rising crime rates.
Okay.
Putting a lot of the blame on what he calls migrant crime. Is this a way to tap into anxieties about personal safety?
Yeah, for sure.
And the well-being of communities.
Absolutely. It's something we've seen before, linking immigration and crime together.
Yeah.
To stoke those fears.
Right.
Even if there's not much evidence to support it. But it is a very powerful way to connect with voters on an emotional level.
Right. He goes on to promise to give back the dignity and respect to law enforcement.
Okay.
Empowering them to stop crime. And he even paints this vivid picture of...
Oh, I bet he used that line about...
criminals walking out of stores with refrigerators.
Yeah.
While police are told to stand down.
So powerful. It's definitely designed to get a reaction from people.
Yeah.
Paint a picture of chaos and lawlessness that really sticks with people who are already worried about rising crime.
Yeah, and reinforce that image of Trump as the strong leader.
Exactly.
Who will take action to restore order.
Yep.
Okay, so now we hear from Suki.
Okay.
who is a server and a mother of 4.
Okay.
She asked about lowering taxes for working Americans, but the conversation shifts pretty quickly to the economic impact of what Trump calls an open border.
Classic Trump.
How does that happen?
He takes any question as an opportunity to get back to his core message.
Right. You know, he sees a question about taxes and uses it as a launch pad to go on about illegal immigration.
Right. And he doesn't hold back. He claims that illegal immigration costs taxpayers billions for things like education, healthcare, rent, and insurance. He argues that these resources should be going to Americans, minorities, and veterans instead.
I mean, yeah, that's a very convincing argument when you put it like that.
Yeah.
It plays right into that sense of fairness.
Yeah.
You know, why should my tax dollars go to them when they could go to us?
Exact.
Hardworking Americans.
Yeah. And then he brings up the fear factor.
Okay.
Claiming that criminals, terrorists, and gang members are crossing the border and impacting Black and Hispanic communities. Again, playing on anxieties.
Right. It's a tried and true tactic.
Yeah.
Tying immigration to crime and terrorism, you know, creates this urgency and fear that really gets to people worried about their safety.
And then comes this just shocking statement. Oh, boy.
He claims 325,000 children are missing or dead after crossing the border.
Wow.
I mean, that is just a disturbing image.
Definitely. It's a heavy claim.
Yeah.
Obviously trying to get a strong emotional reaction from the audience.
Right.
Especially people worried about the effects of illegal immigration.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
From personal anecdotes
Yeah.
to economic anxiety to this very intense conversation about immigration.
For sure.
But there's still more to unpack.
Oh, yeah.
From this town hall.
Definitely. There's a lot more to learn about Trump's messaging and how he connects with potential voters. So stay with us as we keep going.
Yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
It is.
There's much more to come.
Okay, so remember that claim about 325,000 children going missing or dying crossing the border?
Yeah.
I do want to point out that those numbers are highly disputed.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Reliable sources have actually questioned their accuracy.
So take that with a grain of salt. Okay, good to know.
Yeah. Always a good idea to be critical of.
Right.
Emotionally charged statements like that.
Right.
And look for credible sources to verify those kinds of claims.
Makes sense. All right, so next up we have Paul, a veteran.
Okay.
Who asks about finishing the border wall. This is like a classic Trump talking point, right?
It is, and it's very smart to bring it up right after that emotional segment about immigration. It lets him transition to a more concrete discussion about border security. You know, showing off his signature policy.
Right. He talks about how much of the wall he built.
Yeah.
And how he could have finished it if he hadn't.
If he'd won the 2020 election.
Lost the 2020 election.
Yeah.
And then he tells this anecdote about getting Mexico to contribute troops and using tariffs as leverage. I mean, is he trying to
project
strength here?
Absolutely. He's talking to the voters who care about border security and national defense, you know, showing that he's this tough negotiator who can get things done and isn't afraid to play hardball.
Interesting. Okay, let's switch gears for a second.
Okay.
We have Lydia, a first-time voter and college student.
Okay.
Asking about homeownership and affordability. I feel like this is something a lot of our younger listeners are worried about.
It is. Homeownership is a big part of the American dream. And for a lot of young people, it feels impossible these days.
Right.
And Trump knows that he frames it as this thing that he can help them achieve.
Right. He talks about lowering interest rates, reducing regulations, and boosting the economy to make homeownership more accessible.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that appeals to
young voters?
Young voters struggling financially?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
He's connecting economic policy with this really powerful cultural idea.
Right.
It's a hopeful message for people who are overwhelmed by student debt and a tough economy.
Okay, next we hear from Ty, a small business owner.
Okay.
Worried about those rising energy costs.
Yeah, that affects everyone, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Doesn't matter if you own a business or just have to fill up your gas tank.
Right.
Everyone feels it.
So Trump uses this as a chance to talk about energy independence.
Exactly.
He promises to cut those costs in half.
Wow.
Within a year.
Okay.
By increasing drilling and fracking. But then he criticizes those mandates for electric cars.
Oh, really?
Saying that he prefers gasoline and hybrid options.
Interesting. So he's appealing to...
What do you think is the strategy there?
He's appealing to people who aren't ready to switch to renewable energy.
Right.
Especially people working in those industries tied to fossil fuels.
Right.
It makes sense. It gets him support from people who see traditional energy as important for the economy.
Okay, last question comes from Sarah,
All right.
a Marine veteran and Purple Heart recipient.
Okay.
She asks about the VA Choice Program.
Mm-hmm.
For listeners who might not know, can you explain that a little?
Yeah, so the VA Choice Program lets some veterans get health care from private doctors. Right. Instead of having to go through the VA,
Got it.
it was started to deal with those long wait times and limited access to care at the VA.
So Sarah's asking about a program that was supposed to make things better for veterans.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this gives Trump a chance to talk about all the things he's done for veterans.
Right.
He talks about the Choice Program and says he fired 9,000 VA employees who weren't doing their jobs.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty bold.
He also mentions the right to try legislation,
Oh,
which lets terminally ill patients get access to
experimental treatments.
with treatments that aren't FDA approved yet.
It's smart. It lets him connect with people who feel like the healthcare system is failing them.
Right.
Gives them hope.
Okay, so as the town hall wraps up, they ask this broader question.
Okay.
Why is Trump running again?
Right. He doesn't really need to.
He could just retire, right?
Exactly.
So by running again,
Yeah.
he's trying to frame this as a selfless act, motivated by his love for the country and his desire to save it.
Save it from disaster.
Right. It's like he's this reluctant hero,
Yeah.
coming back to rescue the nation.
It's a strong image.
It is.
He's appealing to that part of us that wants someone to fix everything.
Right.
Someone who's not afraid to break the rules.
And we see how he does that throughout the town hall, using stories, appealing to people's emotions,
Definitely.
carefully crafting those messages to connect with voters.
It's all about making that personal connection.
Right. He talks about the American dream fading away,
Right.
the threat of migrant crime,
Yeah.
the need to restore law and order.
It's powerful stuff.
It is.
Especially for people who feel like they've been left behind.
Right.
Or like things just aren't working anymore.
But it's interesting, though.
What's that?
He talks about policy.
Yeah.
Like tax cuts, deregulation, energy independence.
Right.
But it seems
like it's almost an afterthought.
Yeah, almost secondary to those emotional appeals. And the attacks on his opponents.
That's a key takeaway, I think. He's not focused on those policy details.
Right.
He's talking about feelings.
Right.
Anxieties. Simple solutions to complicated problems.
And it's not just policy, right?
What else?
He brings up those hot button issues.
Like what?
Like transgender athletes,
yeah.
election integrity,
Right.
even when they're not really related to the questions.
It's about firing up his base.
Right.
Highlighting the differences between him and his opponents.
And getting a reaction.
Definitely.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into Trump's Lancaster town hall, what's the big takeaway?
I think the most important thing is to be aware of the tactics being used.
Yeah.
Whether you support him or not.
Right.
Just notice how he's trying to appeal to your emotions, how he's crafting these narratives, how he frames issues to get a specific reaction.
It's like you said earlier.
Yeah.
Don't take things at face value.
Exactly.
Do your own research. Think critically.
Be informed.
Yeah.
Because it's up to you as a voter to decide what you believe in and who you think should lead the country.
And that's what this deep dive is all about.
Right.
Giving you the information you need to make those informed decisions.
So next time you hear a politician talking, remember what we talked about today.
Think critically.
Yeah.
Question everything.
Exactly.
Great advice. Thanks for taking us through this deep dive.
My pleasure. Glad to help.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.